Of the neighborhood.
Well, see, all of that you have to try to visualize, like you said, people nowadays, but people's memories are short. And that's part of my view, what has been called in social academic circles, the dumbing down of America. I read an author named John Taylor Gatto who describes this in a book called The Underground History of Education in America. And I don't want to get into all of that right now, but that coupled with the fact that people want stuff when they want it and all that, they don't think about even contemporary history past 2 or 3 weeks ago and how that impacts what's going on now. We don't remember when we were called Negroes. See, I remember, for example, as late as 1978, I knew a prostitute out in Hollywood and out in California, because we were out there and we were doing what we were doing. I went out there.
You out there doing what you do?
I'm getting ready to tell you.
Okay.
We were out there initially. We went out. I'll come back to that another way. But we went out because we had formed a record company here called D.O. Records. But we also writing songs for people, and we were writing songs for Bobby Massey, because this was like 71, 72. And I get to the neighborhood thing. This is like a segue. So, and see, all this is coming to how are we going to make money? Because we couldn't gig because of the shutting down in the clubs and all this kind of stuff. So one of the ideas that Walter had was we would give our own show at Leo's Casino. Leo's Casino was a premier club here in Cleveland. So we came up with the bright idea, and we got one of the guys' brother who worked at Ford to put up the money. And so we put this thing together and we're going to do the show. Now, Jules Berger and Leo Jules managed the club and Leo owns it. Now, this is 71, 72. Anybody knows anything about music, what happened was the OJ's contract with, I think they were with Liberty. It's a black and purple label, was over.
And OJ's are from Cleveland.
Cleveland, right. And the OJ's contract was over. They did some song with Leo. There was just a song. This is when they still had 45s, and there was just one song on one side. Wasn't nothing on the other side of the record. Wasn't no instrumental or nothing. And they put that song out. They had problems with Jules and them in distribution, so they didn't do nothing. So the OJs were hanging up at Leo's at the same time we were doing this. They were in the front, the bar. There's a long bar, and in the back of the bar in the front was a pool table, and the OJs would be in there. Walter and Eddie Levert in particular would be in there shooting pool and stuff. So we getting this together, and we doing the show, and we was okay, Jules and them, and so we're in there rehearsing, and the OJs would come in and watch us rehearse. Now, Bobby decides around this time too, he don't want to sing no more. So he stopped singing. Now, the OJs had a couple of companies, but they had a company on 143rd and Miles called Saru Records. And this is when they had a group called the Ponderosa Twins. The Ponderosa Twins made You Send Me. That was a pretty big local hit. But before that, we wrote a song for them called Hey Lady that was put out on a group called The Elements. And we had D.O. Records, but we wrote for Saru. And my partner Lloyd would call up to Bobby and ask, well, what's happening with the money? And Bobby wouldn't say nothing. So Lloyd, Joe Robinson, who used to manage the Moments, was doing a distribution for Bobby and them. And they were up in Boston, I think. So Lloyd would call up Boston or Baltimore, I can't remember which one. I think it was Boston though. But Lloyd called up to Boston pretending to be with Saru to find out how the record was doing. And they had put it in the test markets of Wheeling, Columbus, and some other city, I can't remember. But the guy down in Columbus said it was #1 in Columbus because they had held it up when they found out Lloyd did that. Because whoever was in Joe Robinson's office called back to find out if Lloyd was with, and they found out, so they stopped the record or something. And the guy told Walter, when we were down there on one of his hustling expeditions, said if he could get the record now, it would be #1. And so we found out, that's when we started to find out about the business side of music. and our distribution and this kind of stuff. And so, anyway, Bobby quit. And then Backstabbers came out from Philly International. Now what happened was Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff was going around forming Philly International at the time. And what a lot of people don't know, because we ended up going out to California. That's how I ended up going to California. We ended up going to California. So we ended up getting to California by the fact that we would write these songs, and Bobby would give them to Bobby Dukes, to what's her name? I'll think of her name in a minute, but she sang with a group called the Blossoms, which interestingly enough is the name of the same group that H.B. Barnum's sister sang for, that backed up Tom Jones. Not unusual to be loved by anyone. That group is called the Blossoms too. But these girls could sing their butts off too. It was 4 of them at different times, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. But Cynthia Woodard is her name. So we write songs for Cynthia. We wrote songs that they gave to Cynthia or they gave to Bobby. And so we went, well, what's happening with the songs? He sent them out to HB to arrange. And so you tell us something. So what Bobby and them didn't understand about us, we just jump in the car and go out there and ask HB. Because we hustling, we selling watches and rings. We just hustle our way across the country. That's what they did. And I say they because I was working at White Motors at the time. My partner Travis, Walter, and another one of our partners, Larry Carter, who was not singing at all, rode out there. And they met HB. And HB was in the studio with one of our songs when they came in. So Walter talked and stuff. They started to come back out to Phoenix, and HB called Walter and told him to come back to Hollywood. Travis and Larry came back to Cleveland, and then I got laid off on White Motors, so me and Travis decided to go out to California, and that's how I ended up going to California. But I'm jumping ahead. Back in that time before 73, when you have the civil rights movement and the Black Power struggle, those are 2 separate movements, and actually the civil rights movement, the civil rights movement was it's like putting like Malcolm say, putting coffee in the milk. I mean, putting milk in the coffee. But the Black Power movement was a hysterical emotional reaction, in my opinion, to what was going on in the 60s too. There was no intellectual development in terms of that explosion.
In Cleveland?
And period. Okay, but Cleveland too.
And did you think that then, or that's your assessment now?
Both, but then I didn't know thinking about it. I was part of it. I was thinking about this yesterday in terms of this interview even. I remember when 66, when the Huff riot started. Walter came running to my house and said...
This is Walter Johnson?
Yeah, Walter, because see, Walter's...
Who is Walter Johnson? Tell us who, because he's all through your story. Walter.
Yeah, Walter is my...
And then tell us about the riot.
Walter is my second best friend he became my best friend after Sherman. When we were on that porch that day and Sherman told Walter to tell me how to handle Diane Williams, that's when the transition from Sherman to Walter, me and Walter talked about everything. Because again, Walter started to talk about stuff that I was interested in, the purpose of life on this planet. See, I've always interested in what is God, who is God. See, Walter was an atheist. And see, Walter talked to me, and I became an atheist based on what Walter talked about, for example. And we'd be sitting on this porch, and the Jehovah's Witnesses would come. So we would sit there and we would wait for them. And he'd take one and I'd take the other. And we'd clock them upside the head with these arguments. But again, we didn't know then that was the intellectual equivalent of what young men do when they're 12 and 13 with their muscles. So I want to run around and show you.
Walter was 12 or 13. He was your age?
No, Walter's 2 years older than me.
He was 2 years older, okay.
Yeah. So and that's one of the reasons why he was like my mentor, like I don't know how you would put it, like And I'm trying to think of like a comrade or something like you say, with comrades, or, you know. And again, he can see into my values, so we're talking about things that I'm interested in. See, Walter was very, very intelligent, even though he was supposed to be a hoodlum. Very intelligent.
Why was he supposed to be a hoodlum?
Well, because he would do stuff like he would come in the study hall and go to every person and ask them for a penny. And then he would get all the way around and get all these pennies. And then when he get at the end, when he get to the last, then he take the pennies and throw them in the air and walk out.
So he was like a bully.
You know, bully, all kind of stuff like that. But he could dance real good. He could write songs. He is the fastest. We call him the fastest in the West because we like people at that time like Paul McCartney and John Lennon. When black people didn't even listen to the Beatles. Walter introduced me to Sergio Mendes in Brazil '65, and I spent one day catching 37 buses trying to catch up with Sergio Mendes. Finally got him. They were out at John Carroll, and I finally got him because we had written a song called "I Do Love You for Just a Lovely Reason," and we wanted them to sing it. And so I never got the chance to show them the song because for one thing, we didn't realize, and we trying to figure out, because we didn't play music. We wrote songs. And that's when I found out there's a difference between a songwriter and a musician. And we got a guy named Don Groden who played the piano, and we get him to transpose a song, and I'm looking at him, and so Walter's telling me what chords to play, and I'm figuring that Don is a musician, he should know, but he don't know what chords making up the song. Walter said, no, not that one, this one, this one. And I said, whoa, he's a musician but not a songwriter. Because I could hear what Walter was talking about, but I couldn't sing it, but I could hear it. So that's when I found out that difference.
So Walter was your peer?
Yeah,
Okay.
more or less, but
More or less, but just a couple of years older?
yeah.
Okay. And so you all were coming of age in the 60s, the civil rights movement going on, and that's where you were.
An example of the emotional hysteria that I'm talking about, as opposed to any intelligence or intellectual consideration going on. Walter came and said the riots, the revolution has started. So this is going to be our contribution to the revolution. Me, Walter, and I forget, it was three of us, but I forgot the third person. We turned around and went over to the plaza. Now there was a store in the plaza called the Plaza Variety. A Jewish guy, probably Eastern Europe. Nice store, mostly knickknacks, what you would call a dollar store today, but much more, it wasn't as tacky. No, not tacky at all. Man's business, $300 plate glass windows, and the best we could do is break them windows. And that's our contribution to the riots. You know, we're going to just stand there and break these windows and then run.
Oh, 66.
60, yeah, you know, so what is that? But see, again, that's just, now that I think about it, it was no thought, you know, nothing, just an emotional reaction to something we didn't even know what was happening.
I was going to say, what did you know about what was happening in the civil rights movement?
Nothing.
So when you say the revolution's coming, what were you all talking about as young people?
We didn't know. See, we talked about stuff like Walter's father was a Moor. Now the Moors culturally are our equivalent of the Masons, except for the Masons can't get as much knowledge as we can in terms of being Moors. The Masons only get 32. We get 360. And so there's a whole history about that, whether you want to believe it or not. And I'm buying into some of it, but not all of it. But Walter was telling me some of the stuff about his father and his relationship with a cultural hero at that time named Tonelli. And Tonelli used to go up on Cedar and talk about being black, that history was started in Africa, not in Greece, this kind of stuff. And he had arrangements with people in bars where they would stop the music in the jukebox for maybe 15 or 20 minutes while Tonelli would tell us about our history and stuff. Now see, I was too young for that. But when Walter would tell me these stories, I was like, oh, I wish I could meet what could have meant to Nelly. And we would talk about being black. We would, never happens.
It's pausing for a second.
Another part of Holton when I was a little baby,
Okay.
we stayed with these people called Mr. and Mrs. Parkman. And they had, as far as I can remember, they had a house like right on the corner of 81st and Holton. There's a bridge right there, the bridge that the blue and green line go across.
Mm-hmm.
And this house was before we get to the bridge.
Okay.
And then we moved from there to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson's house, which is on the other side of the bridge. Now what's there now is where this guy has one of those hydroponic things
Okay.
right on 81st. That's where my house used to be, where that thing is that he's got. There used to be 3 houses there. And there's nothing there now. Well, there's that thing there.
Okay. So both at Mr. and Mrs. Parkman's and Mr. and Mrs. Johnson's, you all were tenants in someone's house.
Right.
Okay.
And we moved to 2558 East 43rd, East 43rd in August of 1960. I hated it at first. But then I don't think I would have
You
grown
would
up
have met Walter and Shirley.
and I don't think I would have grown up anyplace else. It prepared me for everything. Because see, in terms of being African American, by us all being there, that still formed, distorted though it may have been, it was a community. You know, they even still now have picnics and stuff. Canard picnic, the halfway picnic of all the people that live down there. And you know, Carl Stokes grew up down there. Louis Stokes, Carl Character. You know, a lot of our cultural heroes grew up down there.
In 1970, you moved from there all the way to.
Well, no.
Okay.
In 1970, I moved to New York.
Okay.
In February of 1970, I was out of here, one way.
But your parents were still in Outhwaite.
Well, they were still on Case Court.
On Case Court.
And when I came back from New York, they had moved with Miss Parkman and them again to 3741 East 151st and Bartlett. And I lived there with my mother and them until we left and went to California in Points West, which was in 1975, in July of 1975. Me and Travis caught hell trying to get out of here because they had a 1970 Mercury, and we put 2 used Michelin radios on there, which I say Michelin is the best tire in the world because we drove back and forth across this country 3 times on them 2 tires. We've messed up the other 2 all the time, but them 2 stayed with us, and but it took us a long time to leave Cleveland, you know. But there's a whole lot of stuff on the way. I mean, just that trip alone.
So you left and moved to New York in 1970. Your parents were still on Case Court. Your parents moved back with the Parkmans in another house, in a house.
On 3741 East 151st and Bartlett, right on the corner.
3741
East 151st.
East 151st.
And that's when I started going to Tri-C. Then I met Catherine Griggs, Dr. Catherine Griggs now. I met her down there in the philosophy class, and we started going together. Now, Catherine is 3 years older than I am.
When your parents moved, I'm just trying to make sure I get the dates. When your parents moved back with the Parkmans in a different house on 3741 East 151st and Bartlett, what year was that?
70, somewhere in there. Because when I came back in 1970. I came back to Cleveland from New York in September, I think, of 1970.
Okay.
They were living there then.
Okay.
No, in August of 70, because when I got back, I went to Tri-C immediately.
Okay.
Oh, maybe it was September.
And where did did your parents keep moving, or did they find a place where they kind of were stable?
Yeah, when I went
until
to
the point your
when
dad passed away.
when I went to California, I left them on 151st and Bartlett. That was in 1975. I came back from California in July of 1978. They were staying at 3554 East 124th because they finally bought that house. And that's the house that we lived in, and my mother passed in, and I turned into a drug house and all that kind of stuff. Okay. We'll get there whenever we need to. It's still there, but.
What's that house again? That's
3554 East 124th between Oakville and Benham.
Oh, that's enough. Just pause. So you were talking about the Huff riots and civil rights and Black Power and kind of coming of age during that moment, and you were kind of making a distinction between civil rights and Black Power as you understood it
Right.
then.
And also talking about at that point where the neighborhoods were separated and how they were situated relative to now. See, back then it's still like this now, but not nowhere as near as much. West side was white and east side was black. The school district was set up that way. Batista comes in, coming out of the desegregation busing thing, and gives an order to desegregate the schools, and a lot of us, both black and white, think he did it wrong. But in any case, now you get people from the east side going to Marshall, you get the people from the west side coming to East Tech. You're tearing down certain schools. Like my junior high school, Kennard, no longer exists, and we believe that the reason why they tore that down, that's in the middle of the projects, and a lot of white people did not want their daughters going to that school in there with them black young men. And see, in a sense, I can understand it because Kennard at one point had turned into a hotbed for black nationalism on a very low level. So black national, when I was in California, my partner's brother Clyde would come out with Buddy, because Buddy would bring his younger brothers out sometime to hustle with us. And Clyde would tell us how the black nationalists would come into school and just say, well, all the black nationalists leave out, and couldn't nobody stop them. The teachers were scared, the principals were scared. And this was like in the mid and late 70s, yeah, and that's what we were saying. You know, so I can imagine I wouldn't want
Black nationalists were still operating in the mid to late 1970s?
Yeah, in that context, or some people, let's say some people that were calling themselves black nationalists. Let's put it like that. So you have people going up in there saying, now y'all come on out. And then you start to have the development of what ends up becoming gangs. You know, one of the gangs, and I don't know anything about them other than their name, and I know because one of my partner's brothers was one of the heads of the gang, is the Brick City Outlaws, you know. But I don't know anything about them, so I won't comment on them, but except to say that this, to me, well, I think it's a degeneration, not a negative one though, but it's a degeneration relative to the failure of this overcoming that we were supposed to did in the 60s that we didn't do, you know. So Kennard.
So what was your awareness of civil rights and Black Power in the moment as a young person, as a teenager?
Well, my awareness of all those things is things like, I thought that you get an education, you learn and you know, and so then you can go do. I thought that things like, you know, we can't get a job, but we can go to Vietnam and get killed. That alone should guarantee us the rights. All the stuff, I didn't think there should be any question about us getting rights and stuff. And so to say Black Power, we want it now, yeah, that's what I'm for. I'm for that, because I don't understand why you keeping it from us. Same thing my son says now. And so I don't understand. At that time, I did not understand intellectually what white supremacy is. See, I began to understand much later as a realization what white supremacy is, and that's what's holds us up socially. Some of the white supremacy is done intentionally by certain people, and some of it is done culturally by people who don't understand that they're maintaining white supremacy by commission and omission. But back then, I'm in my late teens, early 20s, and see, you have to understand too, at least for me, I'm beginning to experience labor stuff too. Because see, I worked at ENAX. I worked at ENAX in a summer job. Now, my assessment even then was, let me even go back. In 1965, there was a program started, if I got this right, in Chicago, New York, and someplace else, called, when it got here, it was called the 1060 program. This program was beginning to put teenagers to work. The SNCC program came out, the SNCC program came out of this. But see, in 1060, we got summer jobs. Now before that, what we did in the summertime, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, unless you got somebody pregnant at 15 or 16, or you wanted to be grown, you went and got a job at a factory, or you joined a service. But otherwise, you went to the show, to the Hart North Theater, which was on 55th on Saturday, and went to POC swimming pool on Sunday, or vice versa. That's what we did. Or you hustle at the supermarket, or you go to the golf course. We wasn't trying to get no job. Then all of a sudden, here they come with this 1060 program. Now, it just so happens that the 1060 program coincided with the riots. So then they're getting ready to put us out and do stuff, but now we can't. See, my first job with the 1060 program was to go around and knock on people's doors in the east side of Cleveland, in the central area, Quincy and Central, Cedar, and tell them that the chest x-ray wagon mobile thing is going to be on your street at such and such a time. Go get your chest x-ray. But then when the riots hit, we couldn't go into certain areas because everybody was afraid that we was young kids and we was going to get beat up by the people in the riots and all that. So then they did some rearranging and stuff. They sent us down here on 46 off of Prospect. Is a building. The building is still there. I don't know what's in it. And they had us doing some filing or something for something. I don't even know what it was. We just went there and did some filing and doing these cards. But we had this job. Now, what I think was happening at the time is they were getting us used to making money, because when I go to school in September, now I can buy clothes, I can buy alpaca sweaters, I can buy highboys and stuff, I can buy leather coats and stuff. So I'm not, I'm not a kid anymore. Because we imitated people that we thought cool. See, I find it fascinating, even back then. And when I went to California, I could see why. But like on Beretta and on Starsky and Hutch, they had Rooster and that other guy. And I think the Rooster was the one that was a trip to me. He'd always have some pink suit on with a scarf on with a big feather in his hat. And we used to say black pimps did not look like that. Well, out there in California they did. But back here, see, I just happen to have been, there's an urban group called the Magnificent Seven. There's 5 pimps from Cleveland and 2 from Detroit that went to California in the late 60s and turned it out, as we say. And one of the ones that went was a pimp called Marty. And I was with Marty Dog the night he left Cleveland, because me and my partner Walter was selling them, wanting to get them some Seaco's and some cough syrup and some weed. Me, Marty, Pie, and Walter were together. Now we were young, my Pie is 50-some years old. But because we know where to get weed and cough syrup, and that's what they want, they took us to Rizzuto's, which is an after-hour joint back at that time. We running around at night, and because we could hang, we could hang. Now, I'm not saying nothing because I don't know nothing, but I'm still hanging. And so this guy is one of the people that went out. I didn't know that's what he was doing, but a lot of the hustles was tied with Cleveland, because Cleveland is a hard town to hustle in, because at least back then, a lot of players come from here. Cleveland was one of the towns in this country that produced people that knew what they were doing when they was going out to get some money. And I'm not just talking about selling watches and rings. I'm talking about playing con, and playing black con, like the movie The Sting. The black guy that was in The Sting at the beginning, I'm talking about people that were doing what that black guy was doing, you know. And you had people here, you had all kind of games. You had people that could shoot pool. You had people that could, what they call tapatio. You had people that could hang paper. You could have people that could play the Jeff, the stuff, all this kind of stuff. And people ain't gonna talk about that kind of stuff now. And where you want me to start?
Well, we stopped with you talking about civil rights and black power and what you knew at the moment, and you also began to talk about labor issues, or getting to know about labor, jobs, employment, and 1060 program.
Okay, 1060, because the reason why I brought that up is I began to think then about why. Not so much right when I was doing it, but a couple of years later.
Why what?
Why 1060? Why start doing jobs? Because when I come to school, when all of us come to school, now we got money. Now we're buying stuff that the other kids that didn't get a job ain't got. So it's creating those kinds of disparities that weren't there before. Slow, but it's beginning to create them. And then what happened was that program began to take effect. They had SNCC, which was a program after school you get a job. So now we're beginning to be acculturated to get money. As instead of going to have fun as kids, although I got a little problem with that too now, but anyway, we'll talk about that later. So in 1969, I got a job. The 1060 program got me a job at Eden Axle, which was a factory. And what ended up happening, I made more money than my father made, especially when they had to shut down. And the shutdown lasted for like 2 weeks or something. And I went into a department that paid $4.50 an hour, which was a lot of money back then. I think what we made back then was $2.50 an hour. And then I made $3.50 an hour. I made $3.50. My father made $2.50 an hour. And I got paid every week. He got paid every 2 weeks. And so I started to notice things like that. From the standpoint of view of racial stuff and labor stuff, me and 2 other guys were working. And see, Eden Axle used to be a lathe, machine lathe factory in terms of the axles. So you have banks of lathe, and then they would drop their shavings in this conveyor, and the conveyor would bring them all down to this big bin that was under the floor and drop them in there. And what we had to do during shutdown was we had to get in that bin and clean it out. Well, in that bin it's 110 degrees, and the atmosphere is saturated with oil. So you're in the bin with our coveralls on, but oil is seeping through them like osmosis. So when you come out, you got oil all on your skin. I'm talking about black oil. And what happened was my foreman, I remember his name, Danny Reichel. Danny Reichel got chewed out by the union steward, the human relations guy, and somebody else for putting us down in there. It was 3 of us. He put us down in there. Oh, they ate him alive. We didn't care though. We just some kids down in there. We didn't know what we was doing. And we would always, me and another guy, Ray Meckler, is a friend of mine. He was a friend back then. Me and Ray, they had my supervisor had a plan he was doing to show that they could send these axles by rail as opposed to truck or however they were doing it. So we were supposed to band them up, and they showed us how to band them up. And me and Ray banded up a whole bunch of axles while they had 6 guys. Now these happen to be white guys, but I also know it's a union thing now. 6 of them walking around, well, how are we going to do this? And they like wasting time, and they don't band up one. We got 2 of these things, man. We just sitting there, and they acting like we didn't, why are you doing so much work? Now see what this translates to later on when I get to Ford in 1978, things like Ford Brook Park retools. They hire 2,000 people, but the union, the people don't come in and mix in. So all these 2,000 people are put in this plant, and we have 26% absenteeism. They have a contract for, I forgot the engine, and they get a contract bid to either Brook Park or Canada. Canada got 2% absenteeism. Who you think gets the contract? But we don't understand this. And this time, this is when women are coming in, young people, and all of this, all in this one factory. We used to have where women talk, I can't do that, my fingernails. You know, and they talking about throwing heads, a 60-pound head, 6 of them a minute. No, 3 of them a minute. Because the cranes wasn't working and stuff. So you had to pick the head up and throw it and put it on the engine. Well, you don't care about your fingernail. See, and we used to, see, Ford didn't come and ask you for this job. You wouldn't ask them. See, man, I remember I was getting ready to make a comment.
So black people and women were coming into the factory?
Black people, women, young people, foreign people, people who couldn't speak English. And see what happened, Ford liked that because now they had a force that they could mold. Because see, the foundry and plant 2, the people in the union had stuff they worked out there on their own. So like in the foundry, it's supposed to be 1 hour on and 1 hour off. Me and you work an hour, then I rest, then I work an hour, you rest. But what we do, instead of that, you come in and work straight 4 hours, I stay home. Then I come in and work straight 4 hours. We do all kind of stuff like that. That's why they didn't want to say, well, you want to go over to Plant 1? No, I don't want to go over there. You know, and they did
So
all.
you weren't part of the union?
Yeah, I was part of the union. That, see, you have to, this is part of the Reagan stuff too. It started in '80 when Reagan got in with that air traffic controller stuff, although we couldn't see this. And it started when he destroyed the unions. See, because what Ford was doing, for example, they had people laying them off starting in October of 1978. They got hundreds of people laid off. In January of 1979, they started hiring people, but they got people laid off. They let the people they hire work for 3 weeks and then they lay them off. Then they'd hire another group of people. They let them work for 3 weeks and then they lay them off. And the union, what about the people you got that's laid off? You're supposed to get them back to work. The union ain't doing nothing. And it's even more worse. But this goes all the way back to beginning to start in Eden Axle, because Eden Axle, why Eden Axle was not there now, is when I was working there, Eden Axle decided to move to Tennessee, I think. Now Eden was a top paying factory in Cleveland, because Cyrus Eden is to Cleveland what Ford is to Detroit. And Cyrus Eden was paying, whatever he was paying, he was the top. When I went to White Motors, I found White Motors was third. I think TRW was second. Yeah, that's what it was. Eden Axle was first, TRW was second, White Motors was third, and Ford and General Motors was fourth and fifth, but I can't remember which one was which. But when I was at White Motors, I left White Motors making $6.95 an hour. That was in 1975, I got laid off. Came back from California and went out and got a job at Ford in 1978, and I was still not making, I was making $6.19 an hour at Ford 3 years later. See, there's a CD called Casino Capitalism where he talks about wages in the United States increased from 1865 steadily until 1970, and then they flatline. They don't increase anymore. But that's where all this class and race stuff started to mix. And I was conscious of that relative to my friends, even back then. But back then I was more into the Black Power thing. And see,
how so?
See, when we formed the BUSA,
Okay.
we were trying to, I remember Liz took us down to the Pitt Carter Hotel. CORE had a meeting of the colleges, actually. And she took us down to expose us to CORE on the college level and all of that. But what happened was me, her, Rami, all of us was down there, and we got down there late. So this brother got up and said, okay, well, this is the meeting, blah, blah, blah. And if you want to come upstairs and talk some more revolution and stuff, come on, or however you put it. So we get on the elevator and come upstairs. But my friend Robert Bradford, cause see, they got on the elevator and it's like 3 guys and 2 girls, or 3 girls and 2 guys. And so when we get off the elevator, Robert said, and so Rami was with us too. Now Rami is like in his 30s. So when we go in the room, what we find out actually is this was supposed to be what we call today a booty call, actually. And so when Rami came in, and we came in, y'all ain't talking about revolution now. Let's go. So we left him alone. But we were trying to
You
get
got the girls there with the
well, the guys from Core
Uh-huh.
and the girls from Core, they were doing.
Oh, okay.
I guess they had this arrangement,
Oh.
you know. So we high school kids were like
Oh,
in
you
troop.
said we gonna follow up here.
Yeah,
Find out what the revolution is about.
Because see, we were late. We didn't hear the general president. So the guys said, and see, they got on him. They really, you know, why'd you say that? This wasn't for that, you know. Anyway, that was just one incident I remember.
The BUSA was formed when again?
1968, so
Okay.
October 1968.
October 1968.
And we lasted all the way through till 1970 when I graduated. I graduated in January of 1970. But to get back to your asking your question about how I got involved in Black Power, see, and then, you know, I'm dealing with the big afro, the daishiki. I want to identify with all of that. Try to find somebody that my age talk to me about this kind of stuff. I read Leroy Jones's book, who he was called Leroy Jones then, because I was looking for somebody in the bookstore with the big afro, and who can I find, because I don't know what I'm looking for. And Leroy Jones' Home was the name of the book. And the book was about his, he went down, I think he went down with the, maybe not the Kiwanis, but somebody like the Kiwanis took a group of them down to Cuba. As soon as he got down there, he went his own way and went down into the barrios, and he was discussing what he was really seeing as opposed to what they wanted him to see. He was talking, he's the one who talked in home about white people were 11% of the population of the world. They control something like 88% of the resources, and that's when I got my first introduction to black intelligentsia. We ain't calling it that either. And so I'm trying to be like that. My friend Robert Bradford, I was a college-bound student, but I didn't want to do math, which was a mistake now. I didn't want to do math, but I also wanted to be in Mr. Whitman's class. Mr. Whitman, we thought Mr. Whitman was cool. Mr. Whitman was a tall guy and real cool acting, but he taught mechanical drawing. And go in his class and be in his class for 3-4 hours, 3-4 periods. And what he would do is like in college. He would take our book, he would assign 10 drawings or 9 drawings for that period. And if you could do all 10 of them in 10 days and turn them in, you know, you could wait until 10 days before the period is over and turn them in. He'd let you do how you want. So
this was in high school.
Yeah, so we standing there talking, and, you know, I had all kinds of stuff. Because, see, they used to call me God in high school.
God?
Yes.
G-O-D.
Yes, because, see, I read a book, and I had no problem because I'm black nationalist by politics, and my philosophical religious persuasion is Hermetic. And there's a book called The Kabbalion that I used to give people like people give people the Bible. And there's 7 principles in the Kabbalion. And when I first read part of it, it talked about us being gods, although I didn't understand it was in potential. And so we used to have these philosophical debates again in high school.
You were reading the Kabbalion when?
When I was 15, 16 years old. Because, see, let me go back. When we had the arguments with the Jehovah's Witnesses, one of Walter's favorite arguments with the Jehovah's Witnesses was, well, okay, God created everything. Who created God? And so you could get into what we call in philosophy a reductio ad absurdum argument. Except for I wanted to know the answer to the question. I didn't just want to argue with somebody to beat them up. So I went home one day and I said, well, who did create God? Or how did that happen? And I had read some of the Kabbalion because I didn't have my own copy. And it dawned on me as a realization, God was always here. And so then I started to use that. God was here and the earth was always here. It always was, always will be, and always was here. So I started to begin to think like that. And so then that helped me, and so I stopped arguing with the Jehovah's Witnesses a little bit later because Rami pulled me up in front of Walter's house one day, and I was bragging to him about, yeah, I talked to the Jehovah's Witnesses, I made them feel bad and all this. And Rami looked at me and said, why would you do that? And I said, what do you mean? He said, why would you destroy somebody's psychological underpinning without putting something there in his place? And I saw what he meant. I was like 16. And I stopped doing that.
When you read Leroy Jones's Home, you've already read the Kabbalion and other
Or
things,
some of it.
Some of it. Leroy Jones's Home, you were how old at that point?
I was 16 to 17.
Around the same, so you were reading these around the same time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, see, I'm trying to find out, not knowing, I'm trying to find out who to be like. And so I don't have it on today. I'm a Malcolm X kind of guy, not a Martin Luther King guy. I like Martin, but I'm a Malcolm kind of guy, and I always have.
When did you first learn about Malcolm? That's the whole Black Power.
Well, see, I've learned about
before or after Home, or
before, because I heard some radio thing which I think now is famous. I was just listening. I wasn't trying to listen, and the commentator was talking about Malcolm X was crazy. That's the first thing I heard, but I wouldn't see. My mother listened to WGAR and Big Wilson and stuff like that. So I didn't know nothing about WABQ or WGMO until my friend Sherman came over. And the first rhythm and blues song I heard was the first two. Smokey Robinson, one of Smokey Robinson's songs. I think it was Tracks of My Tears, but I'm not sure. It might have been one before that. And the first rhythm and blues song that I heard that I knew was a rhythm and blues song was The Temptations' Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Now, whenever they came out, that's when I started listening to black radio, as opposed to Biggie Wilson and WGAR and all that kind of stuff. And then, I started finding, and see, you have to understand this too. That's when transistor radios came out. They didn't have them before. We had the vacuum tube radios. So now we got transistor radios, and we had the precursor to the boombox. And so now another friend of mine named Eddie Scott had a big transistor radio. And so now, and I'm in 14 through 16, 17, but 14, 15, we're going over in the POC field, and see, that's when I started drinking on my own.
Between ages 14 and 17?
Yeah, well, 14, me and Sherman are walking up the street, and David and Kenny are coming down the street, two other friends of mine. Now, we just got to Kennard, and we're coming from Case Woodland. They're coming from Woodruff and Southway, and so we started talking around, I think we were around 47th and Southway by POC and East Tech. The two fields are together. And so I said, where are you going? And so the conversation, they're going to get something to drink. So I'm a little taller than everybody, and I have a little pencil mustache. So they give me the money and tell me to go to 59th to this store called Johnny's South of the Border. Now, of course, I'm nervous, but I don't know at the time. They would have gave it to my 2-year-old great-grandson. All they had to do was put the money up there. But anyway, I went in, and they didn't have 40 ounces then. We got a quart of Strohs or a quart of Budweiser. A quart of Strohs is what we got. Quarter Strohs, a pint of Perrier, and if we had the money, a fifth of Mantees Red, which was a precursor to Mad Dog, because they didn't have, or MD 2020. That wasn't even invented yet. And see, a lot of these fruit wines hadn't come out yet either. Like Orange Flip, Orange Maid. I could never think of this pineapple wine we used to drink all the time. Okay? Scuba Nut, all that stuff hadn't come out yet. Thunderbird was out, but we didn't drink that. That was a winehead's drink. White Irish Rose out, we didn't drink that. No, that's White Irish Rose is something that we started drinking way later. Way after Mad Dog or MD 2020. We would get, I liked the Manischewitz, but that was what I call ghetto table wine. I didn't start drinking real wines until I went out to California. And HB used to always get Chablis, have a big gallon of Chablis. When I met Joe Cocker out in California, Joe Cocker was one of the nicest people I ever met, but I never saw him without a beer. he used to have a case of beer, and when he was running out, he'd go get some more. And we figured it was because of all them drugs and stuff he took. He wasn't drunk, but he used to just drink the beer to stay cool. But he was a nice guy. I mean, but that's when I started drinking things like I started liking Chablis, Zinfandel, Merlot, and all that. When I get into my career of using and stuff, I used to smoke weed and drink Merlot with my Chinese egg foo young. I drink a fifth of that in a minute. And drink it
What
like
did you
water.
start using?
Well, I started using drinking then around 14 on my own. Then I started smoking weed. I went to see Sherman one day, and Sherman's brother will be getting out of Hudson Farm, because some of us went periodically, and Sandy was one. And so Sherman told me, my brother's coming on, he's got something for us. So I didn't know what he was talking about, me, Sherman talking. So Sandy came on, he had a joint. And I smoked in my first joint, I was 15, I guess. And I remember, they were telling us on the commercials, were talking about, if you smoke this, you're gonna go do this, and they show people doing all kind of crazy stuff that can't even imagine off of smoking a joint. And then when I smoked a joint, I stood out on the porch. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun got real warm, and the grass got real nice and green. And I said, these people are crazy. I'm gonna keep on doing this for good. And it wasn't what they said. But see, what weed did to me, a lot of people get relaxed. I want to go out and have a good time. And I didn't, oh, look at the aquarium, I didn't get like that. I thought, what's wrong with y'all? And so when I got high like that, I didn't get high like other people got high. When I went with David and Kenny that day and got the wine, my thing was that people were lying about when they get drunk. I thought they were lying about that, because my father gave me a little drink of some kind of whiskey when I was young, and I ain't had no feeling from it. And I saw him drinking out of these little glasses, and I couldn't figure out why he didn't put it in a regular glass. And so I thought it was, because it was brown, I thought it was Coke. So I said, let me have some. I must have been about 7 or 8. Oh, Eddie, he called me Eddie Boy because of my nickname. Oh, you don't want that. And so, yeah, let me take a drink. So you let me have a sip. And it burned, but it didn't burn bad. I said, like strong. I like strong, so Goon is strong. So I went back to playing. I don't remember getting tipsy or nothing. I don't remember, Maybe I did, I don't know. But then I just thought people was lying when they said they got drunk. They just want to act like that. So when I drank this Mad Dog and we went over to Kenny's house, Kenny's family, Kenny, his sister was a little older than him, and his brother was older than her. And Kenny's mother and father, they wanted everybody there. So they didn't mind you drinking there. So everybody would come there. So Kenny's friends was there, Karen's friends were there, Gerald's, everybody was there. So we'd have so I come upstairs, I was drunk, come and bust in Kenny's house, I remember that plain as day. And then we all up in there playing around, and we're younger, so they messing with us, and But that's how I started drinking and also smoking weed. And then for a long, long time, we'll get to this later, but for a long, long time, I didn't have no consequences from anything I used. Luckily, I never sniffed glue, although that was prevalent too, and I liked the way airplane glue smelled. I just never could remember to do it, and so then when I finally did think about doing it, they had changed the stuff in it so you couldn't get high. And what I found out when I finally drank syrup, I drank some syrup, cough syrup. They had Robitussin AC and they had codeine in it. And before they changed that, I finally drank some syrup one time. And see, I don't like anything that makes me go down. And syrup, I was trying to watch a horror film, and I couldn't keep my eyes open. And I ain't like that,
So this was kind of an age of experimentation for you, like with wine, with alcohol, with drugs, with philosophy, with
all of that,
movements, with
all of
music, with
all of that at the same time. You have to realize this was the 60s. That's what was happening. There's a book called 1968 that talks about all of this, or at least more than one. And I didn't know until I read that there's a major event in every month of 1968. We're talking about Martin's assassination, Robert Kennedy's assassination, the Democratic Convention. You're talking about John Carlos and them down at the Olympics. You're talking about the Mexicans when they massacred them kids down there, which I didn't know about until I read this book, them 300 kids that got shot down there. You're talking about what they did in France when they had whatever that riot was over in France. All this stuff is happening in 68. Now, me personally, what I would want to go do, and I haven't done yet, but I intend to, is go see what was going on astrologically that has an impact on all of that. But major stuff happening. And then the psycho-spiritual effect as it hits us when we're young, coming out of the high schools, East High, Midi, East High, East Tech, John Hay, even Kennedy, but Kennedy just got built. So Kennedy was a suburban, funny style black, that's the suburbs out there. They're trying to act like the Huxtables before the Huxtables.
So Kennedy was where?
Out on Harvard, where it is now.
Oh, okay.
But they just
but
built
that was
it.
A suburb. That was
Oh,
suburb.
back then there was
Lee
some.
Harvard.
Yes, there was some places.
Okay.
There was some places out there that didn't have sidewalks
Mm-hmm.
back then, you know. And I remember where I think the name of the place is the Elite now. It was called the Heat Wave, and that was a nightclub that I didn't know was out there. And I went out there to try to book my group into the Heat Wave. I didn't meet the person, but that was a nice place, and it became Deering's. It became the Juvade. There's a number of places it became, but it would have been a nice place if we could have got a gig there.
So you were familiar with Lee Harvard as this place where African Americans might migrate to become like what you would now call the Huxtables, right? I mean,
well, yeah, that's what he did. That's what he did.
What other suburbs were you aware of? Like, for instance, East Cleveland. Was that ever in your parlance? East Cleveland?
No, East Cleveland wasn't. I mean, again, see, back then, this is going back to your question about how the neighborhoods were situated. Back then, you stayed kind of like in your neighborhood. Glenville was Glenville. Eastside was, John Hay was in the middle. Mount Pleasant was Mount Pleasant. East Tech was down the way. Kennedy was way out, you know, suburb. And you had your little sections, and that's where you hung out at. You know, at different times, depending on what years we're talking about, if you got caught in the wrong section, you got your ass whooped. You know, and then sometimes you can go in the wrong section and it would be okay. Like I was in 1966, me and Sherman were part of a elementary, junior high school, and high school all-city orchestra thing, all-city orchestra and choir, and it was held in the winter, right before winter break, and they had us, the elementary school, the junior high school, and the high school, and we played in the orchestra, and I met another girl that I liked. Her name was Nadine Johnson. She played the cello, real nice. And me and Sherman and Nadine, when that thing was over with, we all hung together. Nadine lived in Glenville. And I was the usual young, see, I was scared of women, because couldn't talk to them at all. And I was mad at myself for not being able to. And so I used to act out a little bit because I wanted to talk to Nadine and couldn't. And she used to sit next to Sherman, and by Sherman having Filipino, he had the good hair and all this, but she didn't really respond to him like that. She may have responded to me, I didn't know, but I didn't ever try. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that we were waiting with Nadine for her people to come and pick her up, and then we were going to go home, and it started snowing this night. Not a blizzard, but it was coming down pretty bad, and it was really cold. And so whatever happened, I don't know if the people came to the wrong entrance or whatever, but Nadine, they didn't come, and we were standing down there, everybody else was leaving, everybody else was gone, and we're like 12, 13 years old, and Nadine, ain't nobody coming. So me and Sherman figured out, called a taxi. We called a taxi, and then we had the taxi. Now, see, we didn't think they had a taxi drop us off. and then take Dean home. The taxi's going up St. Clair, and we get off on 55th and St. Clair. And me and Sherman with my cello and his violin, in this weather, walk home, almost froze our asses off. And I mean, we almost got frostbite and everything. We went from 55th and St. Clair to Southway. And I'm thinking even now, did we really do that? But we did, you know, because we wanted her to get home. And she got home and all this kind of stuff. And because we didn't know about taxis could drop you, and we didn't know nothing about none of that. And we thought we had to handle it. We couldn't deal with asking mom and all that. We didn't deal with stuff. We just handled it ourselves. But no, see, I was part of why I was scared to go to Nadine. Nadine's living over there in Glenville. I don't want to get caught over there. They'll kill me over there, you know. And then when the movement started to happen and get movement stuff started happening, that kind of lessened a little bit. But then again, part of what I'm calling the degeneration in the 70s and stuff, it started to pick back up with the We Delamores, the Ponderosa. These are some of the gangs in the 70s. I forget some of the names of them gangs and stuff. I never frequented them because the attitude I had as a songwriter and somebody in music, I was above all that. See, that's the attitude I had.
So where did you first hear East Cleveland?
Well, my cousin moved out here. My cousin, Jimmy Austin, who was my mother's brother's son. It's three of them, Jimmy, Pat, and Gloria Jean. Now let me say this before I answer that. Jimmy and Pat were two of the people that contributed to my becoming black too, because we went down to West Virginia when I was 11. Your Cheating Heart had just come out, the movie, about the country western singer. I can't think of his name, but not Merle Haggard, but I'll think of it in a minute. But it came out, and since we used to go to show up here, and I got down there, I tell you what else was out. I Got You, Babe, with Sonny and Cher. Couldn't stand it. And this is before I met Walter real good, so I didn't like the Beatles. I Want to Hold Your Hand and all that. Oh, God, I didn't want to hear that. And that's all they played down there. And then we go to the show, and I'm not realizing that the show is just probably let black people come in. I didn't know nothing about that. So I'm going to watch this movie. And my cousin, Jimmy, had the big afro. So, you know, I'm the old Jimmy. And Pat, I want to go to Vietnam because I found out about the Green Berets. Oh, not only do I want to go to Vietnam, I want to be a Marine, or at least I want to be a Green Beret. Because the Green Beret learns foreign languages and they can do all this stuff. And my cousin looked at me, are you crazy?
Because of Pat?
No, Jimmy.
Jimmy, oh.
Jimmy, Pat too.
Okay.
And then they started talking about not standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and all. And at 11 years old, you know, I thought they was crazy. You don't stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance to the... How do you all get away with that? But then they had me thinking about what they were saying. Or why you go die and you can't get on the... But I didn't know. See, I didn't understand about black then. My mother, whatever. We had a black and white television, so I thought that was everybody's color. I didn't know them was white people. I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. I didn't know that. Now, how I got to know about East Cleveland, my cousin Jimmy was in the Air Force, which I didn't realize this till lately. I realized this in such a way, I got to ask him, am I right? Jimmy was a captain in 1965 in the Air Force. Black. A captain. Now, he didn't fly no planes, but he was a captain. I said, wait a minute. One time we were going down and he had his uniform on, and the police stopped us. And the guy didn't believe, the patrolman didn't believe my cousin was a captain. But my cousin, when he got out the Air Force, he moved here. And he moved in East Cleveland. And what happened was, see, my cousin married a black woman and moved here. And I think they stayed married about a week. Now, I don't know really what happened, but I know my cousin was an alcoholic. And I know also that there was abuse issues. And They divorced. Now, there was another woman that
This is
ran.
Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy. And Jimmy, that's how I got to know about East Cleveland per se. Now, my cousin Dot and Jonathan, remember I said they lived in East Cleveland. They lived on Melrose. And I don't know now, I believe Jonathan was a superintendent of schools out here at one point. And I also believe Dot was the head librarian out here, but I ain't got to check that. But besides that, Jimmy lived here in East Cleveland. And when I was 17, 16, 17, 18, and he had the big afro, I'm trying to deal with him, you know. But see, Jimmy is a Taurus too, and Jimmy he ain't revolutionary and stuff.
So you're 17 years old
16, 17,
16,
15,
17.
15, 16, 17 in there.
when you first learned about East Cleveland,
Yeah.
through Jimmy, your cousin,
Yeah.
who
Lived
has
out
come
here.
back from the Air Force and
Lives
has
out here.
moved to East Cleveland.
Yeah, I think he lived on First or Second or Third Avenue, somewhere over there. I came out to his house once, but see, he met Charlene. Charlene was the manager of McCory's record store that used to be in the main arcade. Not the main arcade, but the arcade that goes from, the one that goes from Euclid to Prospect. The first one, not the second one. And that used to be the anchor store. Charlene is an Italian white woman. Now, initially, me and his sister Pat, we couldn't, what the hell is wrong with you marrying a white woman? And, you know, Jimmy went through, but see, the type of person I am, I'm not mad at white people. I don't have this angst about white people. And I got to know Charlene. Charlene was cool. Charlene passed a few years ago, but she was cool. And see, Charlene,
And they lived together in East Cleveland?
yeah, they got married.
They got married.
And see, Jimmy worked for Sohio, and he's a chemist. He's an organic chemist. And then he became a spook who sat by the door, so to speak, for Sohio. But Jimmy had an alcohol problem, which he took care of. But for a while, he had a real bad alcohol problem. But he ended up moving to New Jersey. And he did something in terms of the corporate thing with the oil company. And him and Pat always used to argue because she felt he was doing this corporate stuff and trying to justify doing this corporate thing because of the money he was making. And she still was more dealing with the people and the movement and stuff. But that's how I first got in touch with East Cleveland. And then East Cleveland was just East Cleveland to me. I mean, it was, you know, wasn't nothing special about it until my brother and a guy named Alex Tisby told me, maybe in 72, 73, somewhere in there, I should become a fireman. And I ain't paying no attention to them, because I thought firemen worked like everybody else. Well, later on, what was out here? 84, 83, because I was out here when my son was born. 82, 83, I found out that firemen work 24 hours on and 48 hours off. Oh, no shit. And then you have what we call a berry day, or they call them different days because the law say you only supposed to work 40 hours a week. Every 3 weeks you take those 8 hours, make another day. So between the 48 hours off, you can take that day and stick in so you can be off 5 days in a row. When I found that out, I said, man, and my brother, I tried to tell you, you didn't tell me that. I'd have been a fireman. So I came out here, and so I filled out the application. I needed a job. Me and my wife, I just got married. And I filled out the application for RTA and the application for East Cleveland Fire within a week. RTA called me. And I went to work for RTA. Me and my wife separated for about 9 months. Got back together, and then I got fired from RTA, or what we call, I didn't make probation. Didn't get fired, but, well, I did get fired, but they had another word for it. You know, This is when they were coming up with all of those words for firing. Furlough, and we're going to furlough you. What the? You firing me? And this is when part of the fallout from Reagan's White House and the air traffic controller thing, okay, let's like, behind that, up until that point you get hired at RTA, you're 90 days, then you're in the union. Same salary. Now you get hired, they make a thing, well, we got to ask the union for a concession. We're going to hire a person at $3 less. And they come in hired at $3 less. Then they get the bump up when they get in the union. And the union went for that crap. And that's how they began to diminish the union in different places, in different ways. And so I'm working for RTA. What I found out at RTA, and they had this way, you have several companies had this. At RTA, you have 6 months for the civil service and 6 months for management. But then at RTA, management has the option to increase their 6 months 2 more months. Now, in my mind, if you don't know if a person is going to be able to do the job in 6 months, you're never going to know. So you don't need 6 months, but you got 8 months. And what happened when I got let go from RTA, I got let go because I still had 1 week of that 2 months extension. And so I didn't make probation. And so I ended up being let go from RTA. Just as my wife was pregnant, I was going through all of the psychological anxiety of not having a job. This was January, and in March I got a letter in the mail. You have been hired by East Cleveland Fire Department. Well, you can imagine how happy I was. Now you have to understand too, in my career, up until this point, I had been laid off from jobs. Now I'm beginning to lose jobs because of being fired. Why did I get fired from RTA? I got fired from RTA because, at least my description of it is this. I worked in the parts department. Parts departments at Reed used to be right before you get to Union. Now, according to their manual, a grade number 4 is the people that go out to the stations to deal with the parts departments in the other stations. I was a grade 3. And a grade 4 is the one that work at Woodhill. So they sent me to Woodhill. Now, there was a guy at Woodhill that came from Triscuit that didn't want to be there. And a mechanic that didn't want to be there. Now, what I would tend to do at night is I would tend to go to sleep in the parts room and go to sleep back there. The guy that didn't want to be at Triscuit told the mechanic to write me up for being asleep. He called me asleep once. But I had to go through the grievance process, so I get a warning. But the guy told me, he said, we're going to make sure you're not here. And so the next time I got wrote up, I wasn't asleep, but he wrote me up anyway. And so, now, my supervisor in the parts department was a guy named Dave Silva. Dave Silva's brother was 2 grades higher than him in administration. They saved me the first time. But the second time, when they wrote me up, since I wasn't in the union, I had that 1 week. I had to go before the head of the department. The head of the department had just got a job. It was announced in the paper he was going to Cleveland Clinic. So he cared nothing about whether I kept my job or not. So I got let go. And that's how I ended up losing my job at RTA. Then
How long were you and your wife married?
We were married altogether 3 years.
Okay.
But
I was trying to figure that out in my head.
we were separated,
Okay.
in between there, we were separated for about 9 months.
Okay. So then you got the job at the East Cleveland Fire Department. So can you tell us what happened there? Did you move to East Cleveland? Did you just start working for
I
the city? How'd
did.
that work?
Yeah, that was another one of them probation things. What happened in East Cleveland, and my description of it is, when I came to work in East Cleveland, there were 48 firefighters in East Cleveland. And when we got hired, African Americans made 16 of them. That was a third. And so I was on the shift. I was on C shift. I was asked a question by the chief at the time before I got hired. Did I have any problems taking orders and trying to impress people? No, I don't have no problem. So they gave me to the person that's the bookest person on the department, Cosmer. And so Cosmer had us doing everything he could, which wasn't much of anything, because sitting around the fire station when ain't no fires, it ain't much to do. You can only clean the fire engine so many times. But anyway, we learned what we had to learn. So anyway, we didn't have a fire for 6 months. I think the only fire we had was a couch. They caught on fire, and then we put it out, saturated it, and about 2 hours later we come back, it's still on fire. Now what you have to understand, people, in a situation like that, especially if they're under somebody that's always trying to have you under a magnifying glass, everybody gets what they call cabin fever or whatever. And we're answering, we want to go to a fire, we ain't never worked one. Anyway, I did this, me and the other guys on my shift, we had to learn every street in East Cleveland, we couldn't miss one. I did stuff like learn how you have your air tanks. So when you go in a fire, the air tanks got 30 minutes of air, the ones in East Cleveland do. So when we come back, what we need to do is fill them up and make sure they're filled. So we can, if we go back again, 10 minutes ain't gone, and we still got the 30 minutes. Or the next shift got 30 minutes. So we had a compressor. So one of the things I did was make sure all of the tanks were filled after we come back from a run, because I got accused of coming out of a fire because I panicked. When what happened was the air tank ran out of air because it didn't have enough air in it, and the thing went off. Now I could have stayed up in there, but they told us not to stay in there with the smoke in there. I put the fire out, did stuff like that. But see, things happen like when I first came to work the first day, I came in the watch room, and there's two white guys, two lieutenants in there arguing about something, which I didn't know what they were arguing about at the time. What I found out was there was a test for captain, and Val Dorsey was the first black firefighter in East Cleveland. Him and these two guys took this test for captain. Val Dorsey got the job. And so they were mad because that was affirmative action. Except for Val Dorsey was capable of being a captain, affirmative action or not. Now Val, they wouldn't let Val be my chief or captain until they couldn't stop him. What that meant was they kept him away from us. And I never went to Station 2. And I know some of this is confusing. But I never went to Station 2. I always stayed at Station 1. And when Val finally got over there, Val brought me and the other two guys that were new African Americans on to explain to us some of the racist stuff that was going on in East Cleveland. Like, you never send a firefighter into a fire by himself. But they was always sending Val in by himself. Val would be in the dormitory in the wintertime, and while he's asleep, they'll open all the windows so it's cold, stuff like that. And what we used to say is they would be playing and by mistake get you in trouble, could almost get you killed, And so, and this is a problem in East Cleveland, has been since then, that the people in East Cleveland want somebody white in administering them in government and like the fire and police, because they always have the administration as white. They don't trust black people. And this is one of the things that we were talking about then, seems to be one of the things going on now.
How's it going on now?
It seems, I'm talking about in terms of people talking about wanting white people to be in administration over black people, because we can't run. That was Devin's thing in the library. We can't run our own stuff. That's what I mean by it seems to be going on now. So anyway, one of the things that happened was all the suburbs want to go down to Cleveland to fire school. Cleveland has a fire school right by the lake, down there somewhere by where Burke Lakefront Airport is, or somewhere down there. But Cleveland won't let the suburbs go to fire school down there because, see, if East Cleveland comes down there and I trip on the steps and break my leg or break my ankle, then East Cleveland will sue Cleveland. So Cleveland said, well, forget that, we ain't having that. So the chief out at Cleveland Heights went and made an arrangement with the western campus of Tri-C to have fire school out there for all the suburbs. So then what has to happen is East Cleveland, Garfield Heights, Beechwood, Aurora, Maple Heights, Mayfield Heights, each one of us would send 1 or 2 or 3 cadets and enough of them until we got a 20 member class, and then we'll have a class. And so that's what we learned fire school in that class as opposed to down at Cleveland. And so when I went to fire school, I got a respite from some of the pressure that I had and some of us had in terms of all the stuff that we had to do. Now see, this is when I found out about this too.
So you were a firefighter, acting as a firefighter before you actually went to firefighter school?
Yeah.
For how long?
About 6 months, because
oh.
you had to come up with the school first.
Mm-hmm.
See, I should have went in immediately, but then, you hire, East Cleveland hires their class, but Maple Heights ain't hired one, or Garfield ain't hired none. So you can't send 3 people to the school.
Mm-hmm.
So then they had it where everybody had their tests, the suburbs, and then they got enough to make up a school, and so there was like about 3 of us. I mean, three sessions. Mm-hmm. I went to one. Me, Dave Phelps went to another one. There's another guy he went to another one. Me,
he was
Mike.
Also a black firefighter.
Yeah, me and Mike were black,
Mm-hmm.
and Al was white,
Mm-hmm.
and me, Mike, and Al, we went to the same one.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
so are those your earliest memories of East Cleveland, or with your cousin Jimmy?
right. Then
Even before John, the superintendent? What's your cousin's name? Am I saying his name?
Jonathan. You got to come around. Because when they got ready to let me go and say they sent me a letter, and I never looked in my mailbox. What you asked me that what happened? See, you have to live in East Cleveland, mm-hmm. and you have like I forgot how many days that you had to move in East Cleveland. Now, me and my wife, we had a house. Now, we didn't own the house. We were renting a house from my friend Rami knew a realtor who got me a house. The older guy was too old to be in the house, so he wanted somebody to take care of the house, so we rented the whole house on 135th off of Abel in Cleveland. So, of course, we didn't want to give up the house, and I didn't know anything about houses then. I thought I could go to the city and they would help me find a house. Didn't do that. So I had to go try to find a house in East Cleveland that we could rent similar to our house in Cleveland. Couldn't find one. Well, actually, we did find one, but I never got to the point where I could talk to the woman about renting it. I had to hurry up and move, so I ended up moving up on Stanwood, on the 4th floor in one of the apartment buildings there. So we were paying 2 rents. We were paying the rent on 135th, and I was staying on Stanwood to meet the residency requirement. Now, what I started to do, my friend Mary, the one I was in school, she lived on Carlian, and I started to use her address, which luckily I didn't, because the first day I was supposed to have been living here, they called. If I had did that, they would have called, I wouldn't have been there. So I probably would have lost the job, got in trouble anyway.
So how long were you East Cleveland firefighter?
11 months and some days or something like that, because I didn't end up, see now it's again, like I said, before I was getting laid off, now I'm not making probation as they say. Because here again, a 6-month probation for the municipality and a 6-month civil service probation. And I didn't make probation. They sent me a letter, and I had just got out of fire school. I was feeling good, feeling like all that pressure was off, learned all the streets, knew everything. Brought my daughter up on a day off. And when I came in, it was A shift. And I remember, see, the captain on A shift was the exact opposite of the C shift. Cool, laid back. And when I walked in, I remember now, him and the guys were looking at me funny, but I didn't know why. And I was showing my daughter the place, all happy and stuff. And so then we went out to the IX Center had not IX Center, the auditorium had a flea market sale. And me and my wife had been separated, and I took them down to the flea market sale and all that. I bought my wife, we bought these leather fishnet or some kind of shirts or something. So me and my wife got into an argument or something when I left and went home, and I came home and I never, ever look in my mailbox. Never. The only time I looked in my mailbox was this day. Someone said, look in the mailbox, there's a letter in there, and there's one says, we no longer need your services as a firefighter in East Cleveland. So now, and see, what had happened was in the meantime, when I got hired, there was a man named Frank Wise that was a city manager. The same.
Was he white or black?
Black. The same city council meeting where Frank Wise, the one I got hired, some people were out here who I didn't know at the time. Later on I found out. Well, then my friend Dr. Jordan told me he was involved in this.
Is this Joy Jordan?
No,
Oh,
Eugene.
Eugene Jordan. Her dad?
Yeah. He said I got to ask him how. But I knew some people were trying to get rid of Frank Wise as city manager. That's all I knew. And I didn't meet Doc till we talking about 82, 83. I didn't meet Doc until 7 years later. So.
And you've already moved from East Cleveland by this point. When you lost the firefighter job, did you stay here?
No, I moved. I mean, because I didn't have no income, for one thing. And so.
So you were East Cleveland resident for 11 months?
No.
No.
I was East Cleveland resident for about 6 months, 7 months, something like that. See, they got Frank Wise, so then this guy named Urban.
Okay, wait a minute. Before we go into Frank Wise, you were 11 months as a firefighter.
Right.
But you only had residency for 6 or 7 months?
So whatever. I stayed with my wife until I was forced to move over here. And then I had to move over here. Because like I said, I was going to say I lived at Mary's house. I started to do that. Mary would have did it.
Okay, they gave you a certain amount of time to relocate.
Yes.
Gotcha.
I forgot how I don't know if it's 90 days or 6 months or something.
Gotcha.
But the day that I was supposed to have been over there, they called because we had something, and they called to get me, and they got me. But luckily, if I had went over to Mary's house, I wouldn't have got me.
In the letter that they sent you that said we no longer need your services as a firefighter, what was the reason they gave you?
They didn't have a reason in the letter, but see, the reason they gave me for not making probation was I wasn't firefighter material, whatever that means.
What was your sense of race relations in the city at that time? I mean, you talked a little bit about it with Val Dorsey. What other remembrances do you have of East Cleveland and your time here during that moment?
Well, what East Cleveland reminded me of New York, like say in Queens, because I lived in Queens when I was in New York. Queens is one of the places. I lived all over New York, but I lived in Queens. So it was like broad streets. I lived up on the 4th floor. When I walked down the street, I got a sense of cosmopolitanness. As far as any racism outside of the fire department, I didn't experience too much of that in terms of being sensitive to it. I didn't experience, it was in the fire department that I experienced whatever I experienced, and actually technically on my shift. Because I didn't see the other shift I was talking about, A shift, didn't seem to have that. I mean, people just went and did their job, you know. And the white guys on the, at least the captain on that, he seemed to be cool in terms of, he ain't into all of that stuff.
So you came in 83.
82.
82. But you had visited earlier with Jimmy, your cousin, who had lived here once or twice.
Once or twice, right.
Had the city changed over that time period?
See, yes, because going back to your movie, that movie, there's like a slow but consistent degeneration over time. And you can see it plus with things like General Motors Fisher Body over here, or wherever we are, over here off of Hayden, and Eaton Axle and all that was over there too. And then
Eaton Axle was in East Cleveland?
Not in East Cleveland, but it's like on the border.
On the border, okay.
You know, you can walk from St. Clair and 140th right down to Hayden and right down the street, you're in East Cleveland. And see people at Fisher Body and in Eaton Axle, and some of those factories that were on the East Cleveland border over there by Coit Road and Noble and over in there, them people was working over there then. So some of them people lived in East Cleveland. You know, I mean, I wasn't paying attention to that per se at that time, but now we can see why East Cleveland starts to fail. You know, some of it, why they start to fail. General Electric is what I'm trying to think of too. Needler Park and all of that. And some of the other factories up, you know, TRW, Gould, these places aren't too far removed from being people can live in East Cleveland in the apartments and stuff that look like Beirut now. See, all them apartments are filled. All up along Superior, all up over there by Reverend Small's church, them two big apartments over there. My friend Muktabo Okanta, when he was in Cleveland State, he lived in an apartment building right next to Small's church because I moved him from there. When I moved him from there in 1990, people still lived in that apartment. It wasn't boarded all up and blown all out like it is now. And that's 1990. So there was a slow but consistent degeneration because East Cleveland per se is a reflection of the whole over-degeneration of the greater Cleveland area. You know, now in terms of any racial stuff, all that stuff is internal to me. So I'm not going to be able to notice anything unless I'm internal. Like the argument that I found when I came to work that day between these two white lieutenants who wanted to be a captain. They were talking about Val shouldn't have got that job, and he was qualified for it. They didn't just give him that, you know. Or conversely, one of the things I brought up about the school at Metro, they like to talk about that school had been in existence for 10 years by the time we got on. And there's only one firefighter that failed at school in the whole 10 years. That firefighter was a young dude named Tony. He was a young black guy, 18 years old. He had went to fire school down there, he failed. Frank Wise, instead of letting him go, which the administration wanted to let him go, sent him to a fire school in Houston, he passed. So they were upset because Frank let him go down to fire school down there because he was African American. And to be honest with me, he was young, he didn't understand the amount of money he was making. He was taking, you know, he was staying out late and all that kind of stuff. But when he got another chance, he straightened up. And I think he's a firefighter in Atlanta now, you know. But those are the kind of things they were doing. Beside the pranks they would pull, you know. I was in the fire, and when I was in the fire trying to do my job according to the book, I'm in the fire, and I put the fire out. The fire was at this auto parts store off of Hayden, Jim's Auto Parts. It's not there now. I jump off the truck, I'll get in, I'm the first one in, I got the tip, and I put the fire out. But as soon as I put the fire out, 10 minutes later, my tank go off. Now, again, I can stay in there, but I know I'm not supposed to stay in there without no tank. And I'm in there by myself, too. And at the door, the window was right there, you know. And again, I didn't say a lot about this, but as I'm growing up, just climbing and stuff, it didn't stop with the monkey bars. I was climbing all on the roofs of the projects, climbing trees in ways that people couldn't understand. They knew me as, beside God in class, they knew me as Spider-Man, because I was. I could get up on top of one of them roofs in about 2 minutes, or not less than that. And I was good at it. And I used to climb on these tech. I would climb on these tech, the old East Tech, and I climbed on these tech and got up to, it used to have a globe on top. It's in the courtyard in the Newies Tech, but it used to be on top. I climbed up on that slate roof to where I could get up by that globe. It's dangerous as I don't know, but that's how I was, you know, and crazy like that, you know, and I would do stuff like that. So being in fires and stuff, once I knew how to put them out, they didn't have I wasn't scared of them. I wasn't scared of heights, so I could do it. And I put the fire out and I left out trying to follow the rules. So they tried to say I ran out the fire. So then they tried to trick me. We had a class and they took the same tank I had. And the first grade, second grade, and third grade firefighter we were supposed to be showing how to put the tank on and all this. And the first grade firefighter, that's the higher rank. The first grade firefighter put my tank on. And lo and behold, 10 minutes later it went out again. Now I thought that vindicated me because what it meant was the people who was on shift before wasn't filling the tanks up. I thought that vindicated me. Well, see, when they let me go, they came out with a folder this thick of all kind of paper stuff. Didn't say whether the stuff got resolved or not. It's just, this is why you're not firefighter material. And that's to answer your question about whether, you know, what it was their reason. I'm not firefighter material. Then, and I brought up Urban and Fred Mosley because Fred Mosley, interestingly enough, was my lawyer who beat me out of $250, which was my fault because I knew better than to write the check in his name. But he beat me out of $250 when I was at RTA. He came out here and became a judge. And when Urban was acting city manager, Fred Mosley was a judge. Fred Mosley and Urban got arrested for embezzlement. I think it was $365,000. Fred was black and Urban was white. Okay. So it was a salt and pepper team. Now,
and this was when?
This was 1983.
Oh, okay, so it was around the same time, okay.
Because this is when I'm getting ready to lose my job.
Okay. And they were both in East Cleveland.
See, they got let go.
One was a judge.
And one was their acting city manager.
The acting city manager.
And they hired, I can't think of his name. One of the people that was on the previous board, I think it's his daughter or his niece or something. But anyway, they hired him. Now I remember that they was changing back over to the mayor format. And the first person that he dealt with his first day in office was me. And I'm a proud black man. We done all overcame. So I'm going to see about my job equally, so I think. And so then we're in the fire department, so we're going to go over to the city manager's, the mayor's office. So I'm following the deputy chief, I'm following, well, first of all, let me say this. When I'm in the office, every time I've been in that office, remember I told you it was the union person, the human resources person, the officer in charge, the deputy chief, we were all in there talking, except for this time. He told them all to leave and just me and him in there. And so me and Cosmer talked for a minute, and basically he said, well, Jim, I hate to say this, but the deck is stacked against you. Now my son had just been born, and I involuntarily cried because it hit me that hard. Now, anyway, when I get there that Monday and we're going to see about my job, I'm walking over. And just as we get to the office of the mayor, his assistant says, and puts her hand up and stops me. And they go in, and they set me outside. Now, I'm 37, 38 years old. I had never felt like that since I was 5 years old, sitting outside of the principal's office at that annex in Rollins of Kinsman Elementary School. Because when you go to the principal's office, they take you upstairs, and that's the only time we would come upstairs. And I remember they used to sit us outside the principal's office when my mother would be in there talking to the principal.
And you think that has something to do with your race or your age? Or?
Well, I know it has something to do with my race. You know, now, Could have had other things too. But see, in terms of being a fireman, I did everything that a fireman was supposed to do. I didn't come out with 100% on the test, but I was in the 90s.
So what was
So
going on with the other black firefighters at this time?
depending on what shift you was on, something or nothing. Just like, okay, for example, one guy named Kevin who was on A shift. Now Kevin, remember A shift is a lackadaisical, laid back shift. So Kevin comes on A shift doing overtime. So Kevin comes on A shift, and in the morning we come in for watch. We come in. So Kevin comes in his tennis shoes. Sort of like some shoes like these that I have on now. And he's sitting there. Now Cosmero and the lieutenant and the other lieutenant are sitting next to each other. Now first of all, they don't like Kevin. Anyway, he's black. But one of the things they don't like about Kevin knows the book back and forward. So they get mad and they write Kevin up for having his shoe, not having his regulation. So Kevin asked me, would I be a witness when the hearing? Problem is, the two lieutenants didn't have regulation shoes on either. But they just didn't like Kevin. But see, Kevin got away with a lot of what he did because he was on a shift where they didn't care about all that regulation stuff. Just do your job. Now, Kevin could have been a little bit more attentive. I would say that. But he knew the book and he did what he was supposed to do, so, you know. And again, I can't remember that captain's name or that deputy chief's name, but he was a lot more laid back.
So you said you were outside the office, they set you outside the office?
Yeah.
They went in and they made a decision
Yeah,
about you?
that was it. And I remember that term demasculinization was going around at that time, and I just thought it was a word. And I did not feel like instinctually having sex with my wife for a month. I felt that, if you understand what I'm talking about, as a real feeling, because I felt like I had been cut off, you know. I had a lot of problems with that back then.
Were you using drugs then?
No, not then. Well, not cocaine or not crack, not then. And I didn't have, what we would say in the program, I didn't have any consequences then with the drugs I did use. I had a lot of misunderstandings about stuff like that too, which were compounded with my intellectual acumen.
So at that point, 83, you're gone from East Cleveland. When do you find your way back to East Cleveland again?
Again in January 2010. Now we can get into this at the next session more so, but now I have gone through all my things with drugs and all that. When I left East Cleveland, obviously I don't go back to my wife, and I had to think about this a minute because now things are starting to meld together, but I ended up living with my mother and my father I ended up living with my mother because my father had already passed. Me and my wife were together when my father passed because my father called me that day. And then later on my mother calls me and said, Eddie, something's wrong with Paige. My father already had a heart attack, and when he was in the hospital, they said he had another one in the hospital. And that's when he stopped working because Penn Central was laying people off back then. And then what they did is they put him on sick leave and just never called him back. And he was worried, you know, in his 60s and stuff, how he's going to take care of his family. But we were kind of grown then, so he didn't have to worry too much. But
so up until 2010, when you went back, your experiences with East Cleveland were pretty episodic. I mean, they were pretty short term through family or through that. The longest experience, your personal experience, was the 11 months.
As a firefighter. Right.
And then once you left in 83, did you give a second look to East Cleveland at all, or you were out, you were gone?
No, when I came back here in January, see what happened was, to make the short version, I can do the long version later.
Okay.
But I had got out of drug treatment at ARC in 2006. Okay. I moved on the way in Shaker Heights, across the street from Shaker Heights High School, in my friend Dia Character's house. She wasn't staying there, but I was. I had 5 bathrooms. I was in there by myself. But see, it was beautiful. It was peaceful and everything. And then we had problems with the house, so I had to move from there. I moved to Union Recovery House on 135th in Union because of some of the people in the program had a place for me to stay. But I couldn't pay my rent. I was the only person that didn't have any income. I had to get out of it. I was a painter. I painted houses then. And so I wasn't really, the guy I was working for was one of the best painters, non-union painters in this city. And he's the only person I really will work for now, actually, even now. But he wasn't paying right. And I could never maintain my rent, which was $300 a month. So in 2010, 2009, I asked my daughter, could I move up with her? And yeah, I can move there. So I moved there. No, it's 2009. I moved there with her.
And where was that?
On 1248 East 111th, off of Superior. And I moved with her primarily because my daughter was into a divorce with my son-in-law. Had it not been for that, I wouldn't have moved there. And I thought he wasn't there. But when I went there that day, she went over to my cousin's house, and when she came home, she brought him back. And so I couldn't get a chance to talk to her for 3 days. And I go, what the hell is this? And so, are you all making up? Because if she all making up, I'm getting out of here. But she said, no, everything is the same. Which I'm like, what do you mean everything is the same? So he's staying, but the long story about that is a divorce. So now I'm figuring that he's gone, but he wasn't gone. So anyway, I ended up staying there. I had an aneurysm, aortic aneurysm, April 7th, 2009, which by all intents and purposes, they say I died. And I say that because my daughter tells me, my doctor told her that while I was on the operating table, my aorta ruptured, which I know what that is. That means it busted open. But he did something, whatever the heck it was. And even though 80% of the people that get this die from it, and 20% of the people survive, 10 of them die every hour until there's only 10 left. Somehow or another, I'm still here, even though I'm one of the worst he's ever seen. And he does this on average of 3 times a week for 12 years. So I go figure, and I'm getting ready to write my own book about that. But when that little episode ended, and I had a second operation in January 9th of 2010, me and my daughter got in an argument in November over food. Now, part of what happened was, part of it was the pressure on her because my son-in-law, because of the way he was doing with her, ended up getting her fired from her job. Well, she was working at one of the campuses of Cleveland Clinic in Lyndhurst, and she had a good job. She had just got it, though. So he ends up getting her fired. I'm still painting, even though I had this aneurysm. I'm still painting because somebody got to do something, because ain't nobody got no money. So I don't make no whole lot of money, but I'm making the only money coming in. And I get food stamps, I give her that. And I bumped it up some kind of way because I didn't find out that I was also supposed to be getting medical from the food stamp people until 8 or 9 months later. So I had a backup money coming. I gave her $500. Anyway, somehow or another, I had bumped it up to where I was giving her about $700 a month. But that wasn't going to last long. And I was trying to get SSI. But I ate some chicken wings or something, which was the 3rd time I ate some food. And she ran all the way up to the 3rd floor and jumped on me in such a way that she reminded me of her mother in terms of the arguments me and her mother used to get into. And I said, I ain't staying here. So she said I had a month to leave. I went down, there's more to this story too, but I went down and I went to see, to the Cosgrove Center, because I used to be a mental health case manager too, and I went to the Cosgrove Center, which I hadn't thought about. Well, some said go to the Cosgrove Center, and I said, go to Cosgrove Center. It said it just like that. Okay, I go to Cosgrove. Cosgrove Center told me about 3 places, and what I had found out when I was at Union Recovery House, you need a case manager. Because I was a case manager, so I'm a case manager myself, I can't case manager, so I need a case manager. Didn't have a case manager. But now I went to the Cosgrove and I had a case manager. Case manager sends me here, place on the west side, and another place down on Spear, right off to Campbell's a case, right there next to where the School of Arts is, apartment building, where the School of Arts.
When you say he sends you here, you mean where?
As a here,
This
at,
apartment building?
at this complex.
This complex, okay.
She sent me to the first one because that's the main office. Now, this is my attitude at that time. I don't want to move in East Cleveland. All them drug addicts and stuff. I had this attitude. I don't want to live in East Cleveland, but I came here because it was closer. I got to go. I didn't want to go on the west side because I didn't feel like catching a bus all the way over there. It was winter time. I made 3 appointments with the woman and counseled all 3 of them. I wanted to live on Spear, right there around East Boulevard, across the street from where Strosacker and all that is. That apartment, I wanted to live there because I wanted to be on the campus or close. And then the other building I had already got stuff for is the one up here on 115th by the speech thing. And so I was trying to get interviews with them, but I came and got an interview here. And Miss Jackson, oh, we can probably get you in a couple of weeks. It took them long as it did because they had to send over to welfare to verify my income, and welfare had to send back. Otherwise, I'd have been in there faster than I got in here. So they had me in here in a month. And so when I got in here, and I'm on the first floor, and I find out it's not the armpit of the world that everybody was telling me. And not only is it not that, it's like sort of kind of like I thought it was when I was a fireman. I'm right here next to the park. I can jog. I can do a lot of other stuff that I want to do. So this ain't too bad. And I got my own little space, which I hadn't had since I was in New York, actually. I was over there at on Honorway, but that wasn't mine, you know. So that's when I get back to East Cleveland. Now, I still ain't trying to get involved in nothing in East Cleveland. I just want to be down in my little room and go to little stuff. And I happen to be going to a group. When I got out of ARC, the Adult Rehabilitation, Salvation Army Adult Rehabilitation thing, which was 2006, I'm staying on the way. And lo and behold, I can go up right up to Lee Road, catch the 37, takes me right up to 7th, drops me right off, and I can go to Borders. So I love bookstores. So what I do to make sure I don't be vegetating in Honorway by myself is I go to Borders all the time. So when I go to Borders, one day I'm in there and I find out there's these guys sitting there meeting. Hey, it's my friend Rami that I know, and Ascari, and Norm Perry, and well, they didn't call him Drew King. So I started meeting with them. In the meantime, I had this idea about starting a black union, but I wanted to find out why a black union hadn't been started. And I knew that Ware Bay, and I knew that Barrett, who was the head of GPAC and had been Carl Stokes' safety director, I know they both did try to do that. So before I try to do something, I want to talk to both of them. I don't know how to get in touch with neither one of them though. But one day I'm sitting up there when I'm thinking about this, Ware Bay and Ascari come in the door. So I get a chance to talk to Ware Bay about this. And so then I started meeting with these guys, and we end up eventually calling ourselves the African Wisdom Circle. And then what we end up doing is we find out that Middy's open. So we come down and start meeting at Middy's. Middy's runs into a little problem. We come back to Borders. Middy decides to open back up. We go back to Middy's and stand. We've been meeting there ever since. So my friend Charles Bevel, I go to the hospital for a checkup. I come out the hospital, and Charles Bevel is coming around where they're fixing the building, the Seidman Center. He just got off the freeway. You know, he's beeping the horn, and I can't run, and I'm running to catch him. And so he just we start talking, so I tell him to come. So Charles is getting ready to move back to Memphis. He comes to the Wisdom Circle, James, you make me, blah, blah, blah. So he moves back to Cleveland instead. So we're meeting. And so William Frambo comes at the behest of Ascari. And William Frambo has control of Legacy Communications, which does the Channel 9, or did do Channel 9 here. And so what I didn't understand at the time when Bill came up there was Ascari had asked him to come, and he asked us to do a series of half-an-hour things about the state of African American community in East Cleveland. We did the first one on history, which turned into an hour, so the half an hour was turned into an hour. We did 3. Now, what I didn't know, well, one day we meet on Tuesday. The African Wisdom Circle meets on Tuesday, from 11 to 2, at Mitty's Place, 1464 East 105. When we left out one day, Charles was bringing me home. He was telling me, he said Bill asked him to ask his wife if she or he could know some people that could help manage the Performing Arts Theater in the library. Charles said he asked him to get the director, and let's talk to him. That was former director Greg Reese. Charles told me in that discussion that Bill had told him Greg Reese came back and said he wouldn't have nothing to do with it. And me and Charles looked at each other, and we weren't, it wasn't nothing happening, that we knew of. And so I looked at him, and we knew that was strange. Your name all over the place, and you don't want to have nothing to do with it. But we didn't think nothing of it, so I said, well, okay, I'll talk to you later. Thursday, that same Thursday, Ascari calls me and said there's going to be a meeting at Arabica on Saturday about the library. Now I'm thinking that the meeting that Ascari is talking about is what Charles is talking about. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll come. And I called Charles and tell him. I called everybody else, but Ascari called other people too. So the African Wisdom Circle is the people that meet at Arabica. Me, Rami, Ascari, Drew King knew, and John Omar knew, but they couldn't come. Lawrence Mays came because Lawrence Mays was the person that Bill Frambo and Ascari saw when they came to the presentation that the former library board made. And Lawrence stood up and asked these questions, one of which, or some of which, made me want to know why the former library board lied. That's all I wanted to know, why they lied. About the library didn't have any money. I was going to ask.
What was the meeting that he went to and asked a bunch of questions at? What was
that was the meeting that the former library board was presenting, where they were talking about presenting to the community forum about inclusion. That was in April.
Where?
With the county.
Okay.
That was the library. That was a meeting in April of 2011. So when I came to Arabica, I'm still thinking at that point that we're talking about the performing arts thing. It's when, and Frambo said he wanted to come and make a presentation at our group. He wasn't part of it, or he didn't see himself as being part of it. And so we started talking about it, and we started talking about inclusion and all of that, and what could be done. And so Charles made a suggestion. I didn't get all of the details, but Charles made this, well, we got to do something legally. Can we do an injunction? So that meeting broke up. Yeah, we're going to try to do an injunction. Next meeting was over at Charles's house, I think, in Indian Hills. And Lawrence told us we can't do an injunction unless there was harm done. But then somebody, I forgot who, brought the 3 ways we could do something. We can get the public involved. We could do the injunction or something like that. Or, then it was when we found out the school board appoints the library board, and it's only 5 people on the school board. So if we can get 3 of the 5 people not to go along with the resolution for inclusion, it ain't gonna happen. And see, at that point though, Bill Frambo made it seem like the resolution for inclusion was gonna happen 3 minutes from now. So we gotta hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. And when we found out that the former library board hadn't even drafted it, oh well, ain't no problem.
So the way you became involved in East Cleveland
Now,
community-based politics was through reconnecting with friends through the African Wisdom Circle, then performing arts, and then cable TV 9,
and then
and then
the library.
then the library.
And then my thing was, and my statement has been to anybody and everybody, I ain't just come here to say, library. If I'm going to involve myself in this, I want to turn East Cleveland itself around. Because I said this in the first or second African Wisdom Circle. I said, I'm tired of East Cleveland looking like Beirut in 1967. And that's before I got involved with the library. And I am. But see, my thing in terms of community involvement, I'm not going to stand on the sidelines and talk about you should do this. I'm going to go do something. If I can, if I can't, I can't. But I'm not going to be, and this is a term I use that has a special psychological development meaning. What I'm going to do different than I did before, as best as I can, I'm not going to be identified with the outcome. I'm going to do what I can, and if it don't work, it don't work. I'm not going to be, oh, God, and all this. Just keep on and do something else. Because I've been identified with the outcome before, depressed and all that. I mean, it is what it is. That film that you showed, they talked about at the beginning, for example, Gladys Watkins and the late councilwoman that just died. Yeah, they both talked about, the way they put it, $50 million of HUD money in the 60s, which is a lot of money, just disappeared. What do you mean it just disappeared? What do you mean? They said HUD gave us money to develop East Cleveland. So they remember when the money disappeared. And I'm not asking them, but that begins to be what I call East Cleveland has their hands in the cookie jar so much that anybody come over here, the pantry's wide open. People got their crumbs falling all off the table, And you find this all the time, whether legitimate or not. So, how you stop this? And you're gonna have a development, you have to stop that. Or forget it. Just let East Cleveland go and become part of Cleveland and part of Cleveland Heights and forget it. Stop joking, playing with yourself. You wanna stop there or keep going?
I think it's a good place to stop, actually. And then when we get back together, we can actually pick up with the campaign.